a police operator for?
Yes, I'd like to file a missing persons report.
Okay, who's missing?
My wife, her name is Marie Jackson.
On November 16, 1994, a Good Samaritan's discovery of a locked sob abandoned by the beach led police to the body of a beloved young mother curled up inside the trunk. While the scene was staged to look like a random attack, the bruises around her neck pointed to a cold-blooded manual strangulation that took place much closer to home than the desolate coastline where she was left. Marie Singleton-Jackson was born on August 12, 1961 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. By the time she was 33, she was the mother of 4 living in Inglewood, California, and had recently married Andre Jackson. While she told people she worked for the Department of Defense, she actually worked for the CIA as a communications specialist. She was described as driven and ambitious, and beyond her government work, she often talked about her dreams of owning her own business and finding a, and I quote, protector to help raise her family. She thought she found that in Andre, but right before the wedding, he changed drastically. He became increasingly possessive and controlling. After the wedding, he caused a lot of tension in the home from his strictness and how he treated Marie's children, which is what ultimately led her to realize the marriage was a mistake. The final straw for Marie was when Andre physically attacked her by putting his hands around her throat. That's when she made the decision to leave him and informed her young children. All she had to do now was to tell Andre, which she planned for the evening of Friday, November 11th, 1994. After that, she was never seen alive again. Later that night, her 8-year-old son, Marcus, woke up to find his baby brother crying and the house empty, something his mother had never done before. Meanwhile, Andre was at his son's football game. At some point, he called the house, and Marcus answered. He asked where his mother was, and he informed Andre that he didn't know and that he was by himself. When Andre finally returned, he gathered the children and dropped them off at his mother's house before going to search for Marie. At 10 a.m. on Saturday, November 12th, when there was still no sign of Marie, Andre called the Inglewood police and reported her missing. He told them she had gone jogging the night before and never returned. Over the next 3 days, Andre engaged in highly visible searches, made calls to Marie's friends, and even posted missing person flyers near Dockweiler State Beach. That's when the Good Samaritan who had seen one of the flyers discovered her 1991 Saab parked on Vista Del Mar. Police impounded the car the same day, and that's when they found Marie's body in a fetal position in the trunk. Investigators were immediately suspicious of Andre, and those suspicions would only grow as the case progressed. When one of the detectives returned to the Inglewood police station, he was surprised to find Andre already in the lobby, and upon telling him about Marie's body in the trunk, he had an extreme emotional outburst in the police lobby, screaming and throwing himself on the floor. The detective later said it was, and I quote, like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. The detective thought it was strange that he was there for updates, almost like he already knew where the investigation was heading. Then, shortly after the strange encounter in the lobby, detectives spotted Andre at a local car wash, calmly cleaning his car like nothing had happened. Believing now more than ever that Andre murdered his wife, they began looking for physical evidence, but that would take almost a decade. Years later, in 2003, detectives took another look at the case and realized there were blood samples from the scene that had never been tested with modern DNA technology. When the FBI lab in Quantico finally ran the test, they found male DNA mixed in with Marie's. Now they just needed to get a DNA sample from Andre, but he was nowhere to be found. Around that same time, his son, Andre Jackson Jr., was arrested on an unrelated charge. So investigators got a warrant to collect his DNA, hoping it might help. In 2007, the results confirmed that the skin flakes found under Marie's fingernails and a blood drop on the hood of her Saab matched Andre's DNA profile. With this new genetic link, investigators called in the FBI's Fugitive Task Force. In 2008, they tracked Andre Jackson down in Tempe, Arizona, arrested him, and brought him back to Los Angeles County to face charges of first-degree murder. He was then offered a deal for voluntary manslaughter with an 11-year sentence, but refused, continuing to maintain his innocence.
Did you kill your wife, Marie Jackson?
No, I did not.
Do you have any idea who did?
No, I do not.
On April 13, 2012, following a 6-week trial, Andre was found guilty of first-degree murder. On June 4th, he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. It's theorized that when she informed him of her decision to leave him while in their garage, he responded by strangling her to death. On a quiet night in October 2021, a single act of violence inside a Buna, Texas home sparked a years-long mystery that would leave a family desperate for answers. What began as the sudden disappearance of Cristi Ruso eventually unraveled into a harrowing tale of betrayal, a hidden confession, and a controversial pursuit of justice. Cristi Ruso was born on January 18, 1990, in Beaumont, Texas, to Kenneth and Donna Ruso. She grew up with 2 siblings and was described as a good-hearted individual who was known for her caring and loyal nature. Unfortunately, by the time Cristi was 31 years old, she'd been living a transient lifestyle and had occasionally gotten herself into legal trouble. She also struggled with substance abuse, and at some point in 2021 was arrested for a reason that's not publicly known. Regardless, on October 20th, 2021, Cristi was released from the Jasper County Jail and got a ride to the home of Colby Hunter Tatum and his girlfriend, Maury Collier, in the 1800 block of County Road 777. Cristi had stayed at Tatum's home on multiple occasions when she had nowhere else to go. Tatum ran a vehicle repair business on the property and was actively working during Cristi's first visit that day. At some point, he dropped her off at the Garden Inn and Suites on Highway 96 in Silsbee. She was then picked up by her aunt, Debbie Wilson, at 4 p.m. and given a ride back to Tatum's home. After that, she was never seen alive again. When all communication with Cristi stopped, her family grew increasingly worried and eventually reported her missing. For over 2 years, her disappearance remained a mystery. Tatum was a suspect from the beginning, but claimed he never saw Cristi again after dropping her off at the motel. However, based on witnesses' accounts, investigators knew this was a lie. By December, investigators had theorized that Cristi had been shot to death after a couple of discoveries that month. First were abandoned trash bags with her clothes and personal items in them that were discarded on a road near Tatum's home. This indicated to investigators that her belongings had been disposed of after she reached Tatum's property the second time, proving he lied. That same month, his girlfriend, Maury, took a Rossi .44 special revolver to the Big Thicket pawn shop and pawned it. Investigators suspected the gun had been used to shoot Cristi. It would still take another 2 years to build a case, and another 2 years after that to get answers. In February 2023, the FBI and local deputies executed a major search warrant on Tatum's property. While they didn't find her remains, they did take sheets of plywood from the floor, walls, and ceiling of the home and swabbed for DNA. Tatum was then arrested on unrelated charges, including drug possession and theft. Finally, on December 21, 2023, Tatum was indicted for the murder of Cristi. However, without a body, prosecutors knew a conviction would be difficult. So in 2025, they offered Tatum a plea deal. In exchange for his cooperation in the case, the state agreed to drop the first-degree murder charges and allowed him instead to plead guilty to tampering with a human corpse. He was also required to take the stand under oath and testify about what really happened to Cristi. He said that after dropping her off, he went back home and began heavily using meth. This caused a state of extreme paranoia. He was there alone with his 7-month-old son, as Maury had left for work. When Cristi arrived and entered the home, Tatum, who was in the bathroom at the time with his .44 caliber pistol, heard someone enter the house. In his paranoid state, he saw a figure dart toward the bedroom where his son was sleeping and fired without realizing it was Cristi. When he realized his mistake, he took her body out to the yard and cremated her remains using sticks and old tires. He then placed the remains in a barrel and dumped them in the Neches River. After learning this new information, investigators searched Tatum's property again and located bone fragments suspected to be human remains, and an article of clothing confirmed by her family to be Cristi's. Dive teams from the Port Arthur Fire Department were deployed to search the Neches River near Avondale, targeting a specific spot Tatum had identified. However, they had trouble searching due to the rough currents and high water levels. The Sheriff's Department has said that they'll resume search efforts in the river as soon as the water levels recede and conditions are deemed safe for divers to continue digging through the mud looking for bone fragments. It's now been almost a year since the search of the river was halted, and as far as I can tell, there are no updates. As for Tatum, he received a 20-year prison sentence. 2 days after his courtroom confession, Maury was arrested and charged with tampering with physical evidence for selling the murder weapon while knowing it had been used to kill Cristi. As of March 2026, her case is still pending. Michelle Lee Kitterman was born premature, weighing just over 4 pounds, on May 12, 1983, in Richland, Washington, to parents Tracy and Robert Kitterman. She arrived just 20 minutes before her twin sister Danielle. She was a self-described girly girl who loved modeling, performing, and being in the spotlight. However, when she gave birth to her son Nathan Lee Cliff on May 25, 2003, she made him the main focus of her life and pushed her modeling dreams to the back burner. She worked multiple jobs over the years, including catering, bartending, and waitressing, basically doing whatever she could to provide for Nathan. Unfortunately, in 2005, Michelle's life took a downturn when she tragically lost her father, Robert. She began to associate with a bad crowd and used drugs for a period of time. By her mid-20s, Michelle was living in Oroville, Washington, and was 11 weeks pregnant by a married man named Daniel Pavek. This affair, which Daniel's wife allegedly knew about, would end in a horrible tragedy. On the night of February 28, 2009, an acquaintance of Michelle's, Tansy Mathis, showed up at her home with a man named Brent Phillips. She said Phillips' name was Hollywood, and he was a drug dealer. After inviting them inside, Phillips offered her some methamphetamine, and she accepted. So all three of them sat and smoked the drugs together. After gaining her trust with the drugs, they asked if she wanted to go to a casino with them, and she agreed. Since they weren't familiar with the area, Michelle sat in the back of the SUV and gave them specific instructions. Unbeknownst to Michelle, there was never a plan to go to a casino, and instead, Mathis had told Phillips that Michelle was a snitch, and that if he took care of her, he would receive up to $10,000. At some point after midnight, Mathis pulled the car over at a remote driveway on Stalker Road, a spot they had pre-chosen, and told Michelle, since it was a rental vehicle, that she would need to get out and smoke. Once she was outside, Mathis looked at Phillips and said, and I quote, "the snitch," which was the signal to start the attack. So Phillips got out of the car in the dark and began choking, beating, and stabbing Michelle with an ice pick. She fought back hard, even pleading for her and her unborn baby's life, but Phillips showed no mercy. Once Michelle was gravely injured, they left her in the remote driveway and fled the scene. Still alive, Michelle tried to crawl up the driveway toward a nearby residence for help, but died before she could make it. After Mathis and Phillips left the scene, they threw the murder weapon in a ravine near the crime scene, and then took the rental car and thoroughly cleaned it, wiping down windows and vacuuming the carpet in an attempt to remove forensic evidence. Later that morning, at approximately 8 a.m., a resident discovered her body. It didn't take long for investigators to have a prime person of interest, Daniel Pavek's wife, Lacey Hirst-Pavek. It was common knowledge in the community that she was angry over the affair and the pregnancy. She had even made several comments in public about wanting Michelle, and I quote, "dead or gone." Lacey worked at Sunrise Chevrolet in Omak, Washington, and it was learned that 3 days before the murder, she had rented a tan Chevrolet Tahoe, the same vehicle Mathis was driving on the night of the murder. After being cleaned, it was returned to the dealership. Due to her obsession with the affair, her performance at work had declined significantly. A coworker of hers even testified that her comments about Michelle had become threatening and abusive in the weeks leading up to the crime. They seized the rental car, and although it had been cleaned, investigators still found forensic evidence linking it to the crime. They also seized Lacey's employment and rental records, which she tried to challenge, but the court ruled that she had no expectation of privacy for those business documents. Throughout the investigations, detectives spoke with 40 different friends and acquaintances, and that's how they learned about Tansy Mathis and Brent Phillips. One of the interviews was with a man named David Richards, who broke the case wide open when he told investigators that Phillips had stolen an ice pick from him. When Phillips returned to Spokane, he told Richards that he had, and I quote, taxed a woman in a messy situation. It was later learned that Richards had actually participated in the planning of the crime and knew very well what the ice pick would be used for. Mathis and Phillips were both arrested on March 26th. That's when Phillips learned that Richards was the one who gave detectives his name. This angered him, and he decided to get back at Richards by blaming him for the crime. He told detectives that Richards was actually at the scene and was the one who murdered Michelle. However, it wasn't long before Phillips had a change of heart and decided to give a full account of what happened.
I go in there today. You want to come to casino with us? And she goes, you guys going to casino? I said, yeah. And she goes, okay. So she jumps in with us.
What all did you see Tansy do out there?
She had the chick by the shoulders, and Dave had the chick by the feet. And the chick, started screaming.
He did this because the group had turned on him, and he wanted to avoid life in prison. For the plea deal, he was required to plead guilty to first-degree murder, manslaughter, kidnapping, and evidence tampering in exchange for a 26-year sentence. Investigators were then contacted by a man named Homan, who said that Mathis instructed him to go to Lacey's house and tell her to, and I quote, keep her mouth shut. She also wanted Homan to murder Phillips to eliminate him as a potential witness. Instead of doing what she asked, he went straight to the police, fearing for his own safety. On March 31st, Lacey was interviewed and confessed, saying she, and I quote, wanted Michelle gone. She was then immediately arrested. Then on April 5th, 2009, David Richards turned himself in. Lacey had orchestrated the entire murder-for-hire plot, and in the end, she was found guilty of aggravated first-degree murder and manslaughter of an unborn child and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Tansy never confessed to the murder, and on April 22, 2010, she was found guilty of aggravated first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Richards went to trial alongside Mathis and was found guilty of second-degree felony murder, first-degree manslaughter, and deadly weapon enhancements. He then received the lightest sentence out of the group, 22 years. As for Daniel Pavek, Lacey's husband and the man behind the affair, he disappeared for 3 weeks in April 2010 after a material witness warrant was issued for him. Thankfully, his lack of testimony did not hinder the cases in the end. Daniel has never been considered a suspect, and his reasons for disappearing for 3 weeks remain unknown. My best guess would be that he didn't want to testify in his wife's trial, where he would have been asked questions about his affair. Even though missing court can be very serious, it doesn't appear he was ever charged with contempt of court or failure to appear.